Creative Chats podcast with Mike Brennan. Welcome to another episode of Creative Chats. It's the podcast for artists, makers, and content creators where we talk about creativity, the creative process, and story. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. I'd love to invite you to stop by dailycreativehabit.com. I have created all sorts of resources for you because I truly believe that when you create, we all win. So I want to see as many of you stepping into your creativity fully, closing the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And I want to help you do that. So I've created resources like the Daily Creative Habit Journal. I've written a book, Make Fun a Habit. I have all sorts of free resources like this podcast and a Facebook group called Daily Creative Habit. Also, the paid membership for Daily Creative Habit, where we get together with like-minded creators, all pushing in the same direction, encouraging each other, and saying we're going to show up every single day to create something to get our work out there into the world. So if you would like to be a part of any of those things, again, stop by dailycreativehabit.com or simply visit my website, which is mikebrennan.me. Hey friends, as I speak and as I do creative coaching, as I have my creative community for Daily Creative Habit, and generally hang around with other creative types, there's something that seems to pop up every so often. As a matter of fact, it's pretty often. And I thought I would just come on and do a podcast on this topic of the importance of finishing creative ideas or projects. And I think that today we struggle even more with this because our attention spans have shrunk so much. Social media, of course, has done a great job with that. And of course, entertainment. It seems that everything keeps getting faster and faster and faster. And our ability to sit with something and actually focus, it has been diminished. Our capacity to be able to do this is something that we struggle with. I mean, I've noticed this myself even. I was around before the internet was around. I know that sounds like an ancient statement, but it's true. I remember when I could actually feel bored because I didn't have things to do. I didn't have resources like that. And I learned how to sit with things. And I think this is something that as time has gone on, younger generations, especially, like I look at my kids and they don't know what it's like to not have the internet, to not have things at their fingertips, to not scratch the itch for instant gratification. And so I think when it comes to our creative projects, it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get the shiny object syndrome, right? Squirrel. We start something and then we abandon it because something better comes along. Or maybe we're not willing to double down on something because we're worried that something better may come along. And we don't want to be using up all our time, energy, and creative resources on something that maybe is lesser than. But I think it's important that we learn this skill, and I do think it's a skill, of finishing. And I know several people that come to mind who I have spoken with, and they are so amazing with ideas. They have notebooks filled with ideas and amazing concepts. But if you ask them how many of those they actually executed and finished, it would be very, very few. And that's their struggle point. They're not struggling with being inspired. They're struggling with being productive. They're struggling with being consistent and showing up and putting the work in and actually completing something before they dart off in another direction. Now, let me just also say, sometimes, yes, it is important that you have multiple projects and kind of multiple irons in the fire, so to speak. I have had a situation where, I'm working on something and perhaps it's, a painting and I'm waiting for something to dry. And in that time, because I'm in the mode of creating, I am switching over to something else, another task, another project, because I'm waiting on a medium to dry or something in the process that's built in a waiting period. So I want to use that time wisely. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is the inability to finish something, the inability to ship something, as Seth Godin says, right? To complete a project and ship it and get it out into the world in front of other people. It's that idea that becomes a reality and becomes something that people can hold in their hands or becomes something that they interact with. It's no longer just an idea. It's now an actual thing in the world. And so I want to just talk about a couple of things regarding this, because I think it's an important skill that we examine and lean into and challenge ourselves, especially if we find ourselves on the side of having a multitude of ideas, but really little to show for it. So I think the first thing is we need to understand that there is power when we complete something. Like, when you complete something, you have this sense of achievement, right? And a sense of confidence. You set out to do something and you actually did it. You proved to yourself first and foremost that you could do something. You have the capacity to follow through on your commitment to create. And this is actually a really crucial skill that not only we need for personal life but professional life as well. This is something that when you show yourself that you can do something, that you can commit, that you can follow through, it's much easier to do the next time because you've set a precedent. And so while the first time may be hard, pushing through that and coming to the other side shows that you can actually complete something. There's also something to be said about the skill of development, like finishing a project that helps you actually develop and refine skills, right? To maybe learn a new skill set or perhaps hone that skill set. And each and every project that you take on, your experience and your expertise are building. They're making you better equipped for not only the project you're working on, but also future projects. You're investing in yourself when you learn to complete things because you're developing a skill. And then there's also like the psychological part, right? The satisfaction that, man, I can actually do what I said I was going to do. I can be that person. And there's a sense of closure when you finish a project. It allows you to move forward with more of a sense of accomplishment, knowing, okay, I did this. And even if it wasn't like perfect, right? Because it never is. And there's that saying, I forget who said it, but there's a quote that says, projects aren't completed, they're just abandoned, right? And sure, there is this fact of sometimes we feel like something doesn't measure up to what we've seen in our heads, and so we need to move on just for that sense of completion and closure. But I think there is something to be said about that sense of satisfaction. It's proving to ourselves that we can do this and to build on that again and again and again. And that's, again, where confidence comes in big time. Another thing is overcoming obstacles. I mean, I just mentioned perfectionism, right? Abandoning something because it wasn't perfect. Perfectionism is something that I think a lot of creatives struggle with. And it actually can prevent you from finishing projects and even starting projects sometimes, because you have this thought, well, it'll never live up to the idea in my head. I'll never be able to attain what it is that I think should be completed by this project. And so if it's imperfect, well, maybe either I'll, wait for something else that seems more valuable, or I just abandoned it because there's no hope in your mind. Or maybe the fear of failure, right? Like, what if I start this project and I can't complete it? What if I'm not good enough? What if the work's not good enough? The imposter syndrome sets in and really stokes the fire of the fear of failure. I think it's important that we shift our perspective to see failure as a learning opportunity, not really just a setback. Because if we think it's only a setback, we won't learn from it. We won't grow from it. And, it's the whole Thomas Edison and the light bulb, right? He did 1,000 light bulbs, and 99, or whatever, maybe it was 100 light bulbs, and 99 of them were failures. But he said, he had to actually do all those to get to the one that was actually working, the one that was a success. And so it wasn't really 99 failures. It was on the road to finding that success because he didn't give up. How about motivation and focus? Maintaining motivation and focus can be really challenging, like I said, especially today with so many things vying for our attention. And this is especially true for projects that are more long-term. If we have to invest in something over weeks or months, it's hard to keep the motivation. It's hard to keep the focus on that and to keep going. I think it's important to regularly remind yourself of why you started this project in the first place and what are the benefits of actually finishing this thing. Break this task, break all the tasks of doing this into smaller, manageable pieces so that you can actually maintain momentum, because it's easier to do small. I talk about this all the time, right? Starting small. It's part of the daily creative habit process. Small added up over time equals big. But small can help you get moving. And once you get moving, there is momentum. And you can keep going, keep feeding that momentum. Another thing I think we need to do is actually set clear goals and deadlines, because so often we have these ideas of these projects and we may see the end in mind, right? We may see the end goal of here's what I want this thing to look like. But we haven't really set clear goals along the way or deadlines. We don't know how to actually manage the process of creating this thing. We just think, well, if I sit down and do this and put work in, I'll end up doing something. I'll go somewhere. It's kind of like getting in your car and just starting to drive. It's like you'll arrive someplace, but are you going to arrive where you intend to, and maybe the time in which you intend to? It's important to define your end goal. Clearly outline what you want to achieve with your project. A well-defined goal, it provides direction and purpose when otherwise you can get really lost and start to drift. And again, break this down. Break down your project into smaller, manageable tasks. Start with the end in mind and reverse engineer it. Each task should have a specific deadline, and when you need to show up and do what part of the project. This helps you create a sense of urgency and can really keep you on track so that you're not falling into this mentality of all or nothing, waiting for large blocks of time, or feeling like you're just overwhelmed by all the different parts of the process that you need to do. It's also important to stay flexible. When you have a plan, it's great and it's crucial, but also being flexible, because we know life happens, right? Things pop up, and being flexible and adjusting goals and deadlines as you need to, it's important, but also not losing sight of the end goal. And it's also not giving yourself excuses to keep pushing things. Know how to call yourself out and know when you're trying to really fool yourself, and when you really do need time to reassess and flex your goals or flex your deadlines. Another thing we need to do is really create a structured plan. And as someone who, honestly, I lean more into the improv. I lean more into spontaneity, and it wasn't always like that. I've learned that a structured plan can be your friend. It doesn't have to be a straitjacket. It doesn't have to be something that confines you or prevents you from doing things that are inspired in the moment. But it actually gives you a process and a pathway. It's a step-by-step approach, right, that you can take, developing a detailed plan that actually outlines each step that you need to do to complete your project. This can help you with preventing from feeling overwhelmed and give you really that clear path that you need so that you can complete things. Use tools and resources to help you. These things are there to make life easier. Whether it's to-do lists, calendars, other apps. There's a ton of ways that you can organize your tasks and deadlines. Figure out what works for you. There's even tools that can help you visually, that they can track your progress and help you stay on track. I think of a few tools that I've used. If you're needing something that is less list-like, that was a little hard to say, look at Trello. Trello is a great resource that gives you kind of these almost like digital index cards, if you will, and you can arrange them and organize them and move them around. You can archive things very easily there, but it can give you a sense of a visual flow of maybe what you need to do. So you're not simply just looking at a list, or if you're like me and you're actually allergic to Excel spreadsheets, that certainly is something that I avoid at all costs. Sometimes I can't get away from it, but I try. There are other times when honestly, the note section in my phone is my best friend. It's a place where I can list some to-dos and organize some thoughts. And then, of course, there's other programs and platforms like Asana and Monday. Those are more project management tools. I've used a lot of those, especially on the design side of things. But the point here is there are tools out there. Research them, find ones that work for you. And if you're not sure, take something for a little test drive. And if it doesn't work, don't force yourself to use a tool that doesn't work with how you work. I mean, it's there to serve you. You're not there to serve it. Okay, that's all I'll say on that. And then just make sure that you have regular review periods here, because, having periodic reviews to look at your progress, to adjust your plan if you need to, adjust your deadlines if you need to. This ensures that you'll keep going, and that you'll be aligned with actually the goal that you've set out to do. And you can, of course, address any of the issues that you need to along the way. Reviewing is simply just going, okay, where have I been? Where am I now? Where am I going? What's happening? What's working? What's not working? Asking yourself these questions is really important as part of this process. We're kind of going to round things out here with the last section of like celebrating milestones and learning from your process. And you've heard me talk about this before in terms of celebrating your wins. I believe that this is something that's so important, because otherwise we keep finding ourselves living in the next as opposed to the now. And we rob ourselves of the ability to review and to understand where we've been and where we are, what we've learned, even through failures and through missteps. And once we celebrate those milestones and those successes, no matter how small they are, it encourages us to keep going. So I think it's important to recognize achievements, small victories. It doesn't have to be huge breakthroughs. It doesn't have to be, hey, let me just wait till the end when I finish this project and then celebrate something. I think acknowledging these milestones really helps you be motivated and reminds you that this is a process and that there is progress. And let's be honest. If we're doing something, we want to know that there's progress being made. Otherwise, what's the point, right? Otherwise, we're spinning our wheels or we're wasting our time. We need to know that something is changing, something is growing, evolving, something is getting closer to where we need to be. Our project is on track, it's going to be finished, and we will be able to share it with the people around us. Reflecting and learning is also something that is key, because like I said, when we take time to reflect what we've learned during the process, each project will actually help build that in us, this sense of, did we meet our initial expectations or not? Were there other insights that were valuable, other lessons that we learned as part of this process? I mean, this is all part of it. And unless we learn to reflect and really examine these things, have these reviews, then we'll miss that opportunity. And we'll maybe get to the end of it and something worked, but we won't really know why. We won't know how, and we probably won't know how to repeat it. And if something hasn't worked, maybe we really haven't done enough of the review and reflection to know, where did this go off the rails and how can I prevent that from happening in the future? And lastly, I just want to say, embracing imperfection. I talked about perfection earlier, but really, embracing imperfection, understanding that no project is ever going to be perfect. And so starting from that point of going, okay, I'm going to embrace the imperfections that I see. And this is part of the creative process. This is part of creative problem solving, right? Completing a project, despite its flaws, is actually a testament to your perseverance and dedication, your creative drive. And so embrace the imperfection as hard as it is. And for some of us, this is even harder because perfectionism rules the day. It dictates what we do and what we don't do. But unless we learn to get a handle on this, we will never, ever complete anything, or very rarely, because nothing will ever be good enough. And perhaps we'll fall into the trap of thinking we will never, ever be good enough. So I hope that this has given you some things to think about in terms of finishing a project, finishing something that you've set out to do, a creative idea, to see it born, to see it executed, to see it show up in this world as something real and tangible, something that other people can interact with. And that sense of completion will continue to grow for you. The more that you do, the more you'll want to complete. And not every idea is going to be created equal, right? Not every project is going to be a smashing success. Matter of fact, you'll probably do a lot of things that will fail even after completion. And the key is not to let that discourage you, but actually understand that this is all part of it as well. I have created many things that have failed. I've poured a lot of hours, a lot of sweat equity into some things that I thought they were going to be received a certain way. I thought that people would welcome a certain idea or project or creation, and in the end, they didn't. But that doesn't discredit all the work that I put into it. It doesn't discredit what I learned along the way. As a matter of fact, a lot of times those projects became bridge ideas and bridge projects to something else, or they were a training ground. They helped me hone a skill. They helped me understand something about myself, or about a process, or about a new industry. There's always something that you can learn. There's always something that you can take away at the end of the day. But you need to be open to that, and you need to be willing. And of course, you need to show up and do the work, because this stuff doesn't get done on its own. Nothing gets completed without the effort and a plan and the resources. So keep yourself motivated, build on that sense of completion, and track it, measure it, review it for yourself, and then share it with others. Maybe even do a behind the scenes that you share with people on taking them through what it looks like for you to complete a project. It might be really interesting for people to see not only the final product, but also how did you get there? What was your process? What were your struggles along the way? People might actually resonate with that more than what it is that you create as the end product. Once they know what you put into it, once they know maybe some of the struggles that were involved, it will make that thing even more valuable. So whatever it is that you're looking at creating today, whatever project, whatever creative ideas that you have, this is your charge to go out and do this, to go out and actually complete the things. Start to amass more and more things that you've created, as opposed to things that you've discarded. Maybe there are projects that you need to revisit right now. As you're listening to this episode, you're thinking about things that you started and you left on the side of the road someplace. Maybe it's time that you go back to them, revisit it, and see, can I pick this up again and complete it? Or maybe I take this and use this as fuel and inspiration for something new that springs out of that. But you're still on a track to complete, to finish. I believe in you. I believe you can do this. Even if your track record has been spotty, even if this has been a complete struggle for you, you can change. You can do this. You need this, and the people around you need this. So as I always leave you with these solo episodes, here's your charge. Go create and finish something. Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.